Hey guys, it's Paradise, and if you're excited to play Battlefield 6, here are some crazy, interesting, and cool things that we learnt after grabbing some brand new and exclusive gameplay from a behind closed doors multiplayer session on the new maps Merak Valley and the highly anticipated returning map Operation Firestorm. There's a lot to go over as the build that we played had some of the promised changes from the community's feedback from the beta, with things like movement, recoil, helicopters, and more being tweaked. Well, let's just dive into it. First, we got to play some of the new map Merak Valley across Conquest, Breakthrough, and the new Escalation game modes. The map itself was pretty fun to try out and test for the first time, although it wasn't as big as we expected it would be, given that the 5 capture points on the map weren't massively spread out, although it was a lot bigger than any of the beta maps we played. The biggest draw of the map though was the destruction, specifically the crane in the middle, which required a good amount of damage but would eventually collapse completely and smash into the surrounding objective buildings as it crashed its way down. We actually got a pretty cool view of this in a helicopter in one match, so it was pretty cool to see. It was almost like a mini version of Levolution. Vehicles were pretty dominant on this map, with the sheer number and variety of tanks available and all of the attachments on them available. If your team actually deployed all of the tanks that they could, it was pretty brutal. But overall it was a fun map. I just felt like it could have been a bit bigger. Then we got to try out Operation Firestorm, a fan favorite map returning, and honestly this one felt so good to jump back into. The map is just really well laid out, with a good mix of buildings for cover and more interesting infantry engagements in the middle, while the outer lanes supported routes for tanks to push, flank, and wreak havoc. For me though, Operation Firestorm is all about the potential of air superiority with the helicopters and jets. It's one of the perfect maps to jump on as an air enjoyer, and both myself and 2-6 had an absolute blast in the attack helicopter, going on some wild kill sprees. And I also got to test out the jets too, which felt great. Taking out enemies, clearing the airspace, and switching onto ground targets and doing strafing runs just felt so good. It felt like Battlefield. The map is largely the same as I remember though, with its spread of control points in Conquest being in the same areas, while some of the outer parts seem to have been tweaked and maybe even expanded on, opening up the more northern part of the map, making it overall bigger and more accessible. Out of the 3 modes we got to play in this multiplayer hands-on, Escalation was the new mode that functions very similarly to Conquest but with a twist. 2 teams are capturing control points on the map just like in Conquest, but the number of available points decreases over time and funnels players into a smaller section of the map. So instead of constantly trying to capture the whole map and flanking and going on your own to secure a point, it felt like your team was more concentrated in certain areas. Honestly, we didn't fully get to grips with this game mode in the limited time that we had, but it felt like a more intense Conquest and was more about funneling players to specific capture points instead of the larger map and flanking and all of that stuff that you experience in normal Conquest. For the weapons, the developers have confirmed that they've increased the recoil and handling on them. They mentioned before that fans felt some of the weapons were like lasers or too similar to each other due to a lack of recoil, and in the gameplay we tried, some of the weapons have a lot more kick when shooting, especially over long distances or fully spraying. We had access to all of the weapons and accessories, meaning we got to test a lot of them, and the recoil definitely felt a lot closer to what you would expect from older Battlefield games. In addition to these changes, they also tweaked how the game handles single and tap firing modes for guns, making them more viable, which is great for those longer range engagements. Another concern that's also been addressed is the jumping and shooting, and now there is way more spread on your gun when you're jumping, meaning you probably won't see as many of those crazy jumping and sliding clips on Twitter for the final game. It fully messes up your weapon's accuracy. For those worried about the absolute terror of the beta returning untouched though, the shotgun, well, you'll be happy to hear it's been significantly nerfed. It requires you to land more shots due to the change of the weapon, and while it can still one-shot in some instances up close, it isn't going to be as easy as it was in the beta, and the majority of time you're going to have to get very close to enemies. As mentioned, they did make those changes to the ability to jump and shoot accurately. But that isn't the only change they've made to movement, as sliding now has reduced horizontal speed, momentum, and length, so it's more so a situational use, and alongside that they've reduced the horizontal strafe speed of players to make for more tactical gunplays and engagements. The vehicles also got some changes too, with ground vehicles now having a boost so you can cover larger distances a bit quicker. They also mentioned that they've improved the external cam for gunners for better clarity and control. But honestly, we didn't notice a massive difference, but we did spend most of our time in a helicopter or as infantry, so hopefully it's more noticeable to you guys. Now let's talk about the helicopter, because the movement and controls have been dialed up. It feels closer to Battlefield 4, with the helicopter being able to move much faster and be more responsive. DICE said they've dialed it up and now you can feel it. It really doesn't feel like you're controlling a blimp anymore. Another massive improvement to the helicopter though is that the main gunner's weapon actually seems a lot more effective than it did before. Enemies take a lot less shots to go down, which made the helicopter feel way more enjoyable as a whole and more in line with the past games. We also got to test some of the attachments for the helicopters, like the heavy weapons, which increases the damage of the helicopter's weapons at the cost of speed and handling. Meanwhile, interference made it harder for enemies to lock onto you while you're moving, and the other missile types like light and heavy rockets made it easier for the pilot to secure kills on a target. They've also made a big change. They've locked it so that engineers can only select one type of launcher as their gadget, rather than being able to select both a ground and anti-air one. Hopefully this means that the helicopter's survivability will be increased, but we did still find ours being shot out of the sky a bit too easily by everything from stationary anti-air turrets to tanks, anti-air tanks, engineers, and jets, but that could have just been because we were playing with a lobby full of creators that knew what to do. We did also get to test the Black Hawk transport, and normally we're massive fans of transport helicopters as they're a bunch of fun to play and help your team secure a capture point and just spray those miniguns. But man, the controls for them were way more sluggish than the usual transport helicopter controls. So whatever you have in mind for the movement based on prior Battlefields, it's like it's 2 times more sluggish than that. It honestly just felt off. But something we were really eager to test out was some of the new gadgets and how they worked. For example, in this build, the ladder for the assault was available, and we wanted to see how it actually works and deploys. Now from our testing, the assault ladder is going to be super useful. It can be deployed to reach places much higher than we expected, because in the initial trailer it looked like it would just reach windows and second story heights, but you can actually use it to reach rooftops, which will be super useful for flanking. The ladder itself has 2 different modes, a ramp mode which can be deployed more horizontally, letting you walk along it while shooting, and then a ladder mode which is placed more vertically, which just functions as a ladder and needs to be climbed. It's also great for setting up and peeking over terrain that the enemy won't be expecting. Another cool addition for the assault class is the breaching projectile launcher. This functions like a grenade launcher that sticks to walls, doors, and windows, then explodes after a second, launching a damaging and blinding explosion on the other side that you stuck it to. This will really help with breaching rooms with campers inside. The assault also now has the deploy beacon assigned to their gadgets, and it functions exactly like it used to. It's a very strong tool for your team, and it might be used more aggressively now it's not on the recon class. Finally, the assault had an Incendiary-Round Shotgun as a gadget, which shoots a burst of fire that ignites enemies and burns them over time. But honestly, this felt extremely underwhelming, so while it may sound like a nightmare after how powerful the shotgun was in the beta, this incendiary round version is not something I'm worried about, as it took several shots to take down an enemy. We were also very eager to test out the Sledge Hammer, and we must say this thing is awesome. You can topple most walls in a building, and you can see here we were able to knock out most of the side of a building, completely exposing it. The Sledge Hammer isn't under the gadgets section though, instead it comes out as your melee weapon, which each one has their positives and negatives. Now for the Sledge Hammer, it takes 2 to 3 swings to break through a wall, and you can see and hear the difference if a wall is breakable or not. You can also break the floor under yourself or your teammates, which could end up being a bit trolly, as teammates can just run over to you and break the wall underneath your feet, dropping you into a building full of enemies. So it's going to be interesting to see how they balance this, as overall it's an extremely cool addition to our kit in Battlefield. There's definitely going to be some awesome plays using this. Now the Recon's drone is something that's super interesting as you can use it to scout the map for your team, and it has the ability to view both the field in thermal and non-thermal cameras. However, that wasn't what we were interested in it for. We were interested to see if you could actually do what they showed in the trailer, where you load it up with C4 and blow something up. Now the answer to this is yes and no, because you can load the drone up with C4, but it dramatically reduces the battery power of the drone, meaning you won't be able to get very far without just detonating the UAV drone itself. You can load it up with less than 3 C4s, but it probably isn't going to be enough to really take out anything like a tank unless it's already very damaged, and the reduced move speed makes it go super slow. So good luck catching anything if they're actually moving away from you and they aren't close or stationary. However, we understand that this can be for balance reasons because it would be far too easy for someone to just destroy tanks if it wasn't set up this way. Another cool thing that the Recon gets access to is the new decoys, and this is awesome. You can see how it will throw people off at a range because it's perfectly shaped, and not only that, but the decoys have their own sniper glint, which will instantly mark them on the enemy's minimap and show an in-world position. But the gadget's glint will actually replace your own when you're nearby it, meaning you're less likely to be shot at unless the enemy realizes that the decoy is a fake. Now going back to the bots, the EOD bot is back, and we actually found it to be even more useful than the UAV bot because this is one you can actually load up with a stack of C4 without any battery or movement penalties. This means you can chase down tanks and vehicles to get them, and as always, it's super useful as you're able to spot enemy equipment like mines and redeploy beacons through walls and destroy them. If you are lucky enough to get close to a tank, then you can even use the repair tool on it to destroy the enemy's tank. Although it can just get run over by friendlies, which does feel really bad. Next, both the Mortar and Airburst launcher return in Battlefield 6, and both from our limited testing weren't super OP. The Airburst launches a cloud of chemicals that acts as an area denial tool rather than something to straight farm kills with. It was locked to 25 meters and we couldn't really figure out how to zero in the distance on it as it wasn't the same button as usual. To be honest, it didn't do much damage, but it would 100% deter enemies from occupying a position, so it could be good to use on choke points and funnels. Now the portable mortar was something really cool to try out as it lets you place a stationary mortar to rain shells down on enemies from nearly halfway across the map. You actually use the minimap to aim the shots, and each shell has a big delay before landing, meaning you really have to predict where the enemy will be or move to even if you can see them marked on your map. But something really cool is that it actually saved us one time as it blocked a tank from running us over, so that was pretty fun. Then we have some returning classics, the Laser Designator and Tracer Dart. These function largely the same as we remember from past games. The Laser Designator lets you look at an enemy vehicle and mark it for your team to lock on much faster with rockets. This is actually very strong, especially when an enemy drops flares because you can then relock onto them much faster. However, the Tracer Dart lets you shoot a projectile that sticks to enemy vehicles and then paints it. This is very strong but sometimes tricky to land. It globally marks the marked enemy vehicle for your whole team and even shows the vehicle through walls and increases lock-on speed for rockets. Then there was the Vehicle Supply Crate, which was available for engineers, which acts as a pallet of ammo and gear for nearby friendly vehicles to restock with. It speeds up their equipment cooldowns, which could be very strong considering these bigger maps have a lot of tanks available to them. So this was most of the things we experienced in the multiplayer hands-on event. We'll have more Battlefield 6 stuff coming your way soon as we really got to experiment with a lot of different weapons and things, so tell us below what would you like to see next for Battlefield 6, and then subscribe because we'll have you covered coming very, very soon. Here at Arix Gaming, we're two friends who love to play games. You have me, Paradise, as well as 26.
Our goal is to keep the videos as concise as possible by cutting out any of the fluff and focusing on what really matters with high quality videos.
So make sure you're subscribed down below for more videos on your favorite games coming very, very soon.